Chicago, about 6 hours south of Chicago. We don't really claim Chicago as a little today I'm gonna share like a very really condensed packed version of my testimony because I can sit here and talk for like 2 hours. But I love to talk. It's kind of one of my weaknesses, I guess. So today I'm gonna talk about where God has led me from being a small little kid to a young man who I am now, about 24, almost 25. So I'll give you a little background of where I've come from and then where God got me through and where I am today. So I have a few verses of 3 points I really wanted to hit on in my testimony that have verses to them too. So I can get a good gospel impact through my testimony instead of just sitting here and telling you guys a story about my life. Because that's what I think whenever you share your testimony, if you're just sharing your life story, it doesn't have gospel focus to it, then what's the meaning behind that, And so, I come from a broken childhood. Wasn't raised with Christ. I was in a way. My mother, she was a Christian. She gave everything to God. She taught us how to live for Him and read us the Word every night. But my father, I never had a father. I had a father, but he was more of a person that just left me when I was really young. So I never really had a father figure in my life. The only father figure I did have was my stepdad, who was not a father figure at all. Someone that came home, we came home from school every day, and he was just really hurt us a lot. And I remember I did believe in God when I was younger. I remember praying, I'm like, God, if you are out there, please get me out of this. And so I grew up with that all my life until I hit the age of 9. Whenever I was 9, day after my 9th birthday, my mother was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. So that really took my life and threw it into this mixing bowl of emotions and hate towards people and hate towards people around me and really just people in general. People are very, I thought people were so evil. I'm if you are out there, God, why'd you do this to me? So my hatred towards people really grew, as well as my hatred towards God, and how God was if you say you're just loving God, how would you do this to me? And how could you? But I really had this resentment in my heart for Him and for people. And so I got thrown into the foster care system at a young age. Became a ward of the state of Illinois, so I got through into foster homes and children's homes, and I was into the system at a really young age. Got into the wrong stuff, and started hanging out in the wrong crowd of people because the only people that really accepted me were people that kind of outside themselves, and so I was the same way, and so. Postponed a few years. I'm trying to condense this. Postponed a few years in high school. I lived in a children's home from 8th grade all the way up until I graduated, and I went through a crazy cycle in that place. That's where I really found God, truly, that myself did. And so I remember looking in the mirror one day and saying, who am I and what am I doing? If I were to die today, because I had a friend that died a few weeks before, and I know he definitely did not know Christ, and these things started eating me up. They started the Holy Spirit really started waking up with me. So I had been planted by my mother at a very young age, a seed of the Holy Spirit that started waking up. Started hey, started churning in me. These questions started that I started asking myself. I looked in the mirror if I were to die today, what would happen to me? Would I would I see my mother again, or would I would I not see her? And so I know I wouldn't. And so for me, a really hard struggle was comparing myself to others because I see so someone invited me to church, and my view towards Christians wasn't the best. I'm not gonna lie. My foster parents had many that were hypocritical, and that's all the view I had as a Christian was here's this person that loves God and loves and His people, but says one thing and totally does a whole nother thing. And I'm this is what you call your so-called Christians. So that's exactly what I didn't want to be. So that's why I never even tried it. Then someone invited me to this church, or this Baptist church back where I'm from, in Murfreesboro, Illinois. And he invited me to this bonfire. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go to the bonfire. We pull up, it's a church, I'm like, you didn't tell me it's a church. And like, here it was, like, expecting like people would be like, oh, Jesus. But no, it was actually like, they started to show me what love was and how God's love is the greatest love. And through his love, I don't have to keep on searching. Because like, for my whole life, I've been searching for like this thing to fill me. I had been so empty my whole life. And like, from people that had, betrayed me, or family that had betrayed me or left me. I had always been looking to fill this cup that I had, and I always let myself empty. I've tried, substances, I've tried alcohol, I've tried so many things to fill that cup, and I always let myself empty. I'm like wanting more of it, but knowing that it's never gonna fill me. And so here it was, at like the age of 16, and God really started breaking into my life, and really started working me by these people at this church. So I really got involved with this church. And I don't remember the day or the hour that I gave my life to Christ, but I remember like the time in my life where like I really learned what grace was and mercy was. That like I'm like, here I am, this like broken vessel. I'm like, there's no way this God would love me. Like I've turned my back against him for so long, and and then the New Testament had showed me Ephesians 2:8-9, which says, I know it's a very known one, but I really want to hit on it. It's, for by grace you've been saved through faith, and it is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. And so that really struck on me. I'm like, you tell me there's a God out there that loved me so much that he that grace, his grace is so sufficient that he died for me. I'm like, that just took my life and just jam-packed it with the gospel. And I'm like, wow, there's this God out there that despite this hell that I've been through, this stuff that I've been through, loved me so much that he would die for me. I'm like, and that started convicting me, and I wanted to let people know about that. But at the same time, I looked at these people that are like, these godly people. I'm like, and here I am still a very baby Christian. I'm still I call myself a teen Christian now, and I'm not even the epitome of a godly man, but I'm working there, I think it's a daily thing. But I started comparing myself to these people, and I'm like, man, I want to be that, and then I'm like, why am I not like that? And then I'm started being like, God, why didn't you make me like them? I see people going doing mission work, and my friends going over to South Africa doing this mission work stuff, and here I am, a little Murfreesboro, Illinois, feeling like I'm not doing anything. And so I compare myself with others a lot. And I found a Bible verse about that, and that really spun me around about that. And so it's also in Romans. Romans is really good right now because we're going through it in the the young adults at the Rabies. And so I've been reading Romans a lot. And so it says, so dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into the new person by changing you the way you think, the way you will learn to know God's will through you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And so, Romans 12:1 was really speaking on me that, I was even comparing myself to non-believers. I'm like, well, look who I was before, and then look who I am now. But then I read this verse, and it really spoke on me into to stop comparing myself to others, and to start living through, letting God live through me the way He is. And so, like I said before, my heart towards people had been really bitter for a long time, and that's one thing He's really started changing me too, is having a real heart for people and and for His kingdom. I learned that I'm wow, there's all these people out in the world, and I still hate, I still have this bitterness towards them. I don't know them really. I didn't know my father, but I still had so much resentment towards the man. And I didn't know the man that killed my mother, but I had so much resentment toward him. And I'm holding this bondage and this chain that's needed to be broken free. And so I'm reading you guys here in John 13. The verses are 34 and 35. I'm going to read here. So it says, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove the world that you are my disciples. So I'm this really convicted me. I'm here I am, this new baby Christian, and like still had all this baggage that was carrying with me, like this giant bag, or like whenever a prisoner has that giant ball like the old times. I'm like carrying that with me as I'm walking into church and stuff, and that big ball was like people that had still had hatred for, and I still couldn't let go of, and they were just living their life. It was me that was stuck in the past. It was me that was stuck in having so much resentment for these people, and I'm I had to break free of that, and so I went through a study with my youth pastor on this very 2 verses right here, and so I started to God started to work inside me, and started having a heart for people, and seeing how God sees people. He sees them as souls that that wanted to be, that He wanted to save, and so I'm like, yeah, you're right. And, for so long I'm like, oh well, my father, or this guy doesn't know God, or doesn't only even deserve God because of what they did, because I was so new to hearing about God, hearing that through Him He could save anybody. And so I started doing prison ministry actually at the age of 18. And so that, I don't know if you guys ever done that, but that was the biggest eye opener in my life of God can really save anybody, and He is to save everybody. And here are these guys that had done all these crazy things that that the human mind can't even wrap around. I'm and I learned so much about grace, and I learned how these people are loved just as much as I'm loved, and these people have a heart and a soul just as I have a heart and a soul. And so that really showed me God, and the way that God worked through that prison, and through the prison ministry that was part of, and how through that opened my heart to more love for people, and more love for his people. I keep on saying the people, but His people, His children. And we're adopted by God whenever you're saved. Sorry, I'm getting off topic, but yeah. So the prison ministry was a really big eye opener to the kingdom of God, how big it is. I think it was this small little thing, but then it grows into this massive thing that's that covers the whole world. I mean, the gospel is just it's everywhere. It's non-stopping, and so yeah, I forgave those people. And I learned a lot about forgiveness, and I learned that forgiveness is not for the other person; it's for you, because you had to break free of that bondage that you're holding, and that hatred that you're holding for that person. And I actually sought them out. So I still had the paper clippings from whenever I was really young. My grandparents did, and I found the name of the guy that was in the car accident with my mother, and I found him on Facebook, y'all. And he had still been he had been released and stuff, and I think he was on I can't remember what he was on, but he was out, and it was just this one time that he was out. I think he was, I don't know what that's called, whenever you, yeah. So he was on that, and I sought him out, and of course came with a lot of people, a lot of godly men that came with me, and this guy just started breaking down. I'm like, you know what, man? My whole life I had so much resentment towards you, and I don't know what I would do if I were to meet you someday, but I forgive you, man. And I forgive the thing that you did. I forgive you, and I said, I know it sounds weird, but I love you. And he started breaking down, and the prison ministry that I started working, I went to another prison ministry, and I saw him there, and he shared with me how he gave his life to Christ. And that was just so cool to hear about. I'm not saying it was through me that he did, but he's hearing what you said, the words that you said, how I had done this horrible thing in your life, and totally threw your life into this mixing ball, like I said before, but how you forgave me, that showed me so much compassion, and how God's compassion is bigger than anybody's that we can ever understand, and forgiveness is so big. They say, that old hymn says, and the word says, they would know us by our love, they would know we're Christians by our love, not by going and oh God hates you, that's not the gospel, I understand, everybody has their own ways of sharing it, but for me, it's interacting with the person, walking through their life and showing it to them, so for me, another big thing for me was I didn't have a father figure. So I never had a godly man to look up to because the foster homes that I lived in weren't the best. And so the children's home I lived in, it was only, I kid you not, only females. Like I had like 10 different moms, like no father figure, no male. And so like then God really started working in me, like, hey, you really need to seek out godly men, and like you need to really seek out these people that that love me, but also lead a family well, and like you need to start learning from them because you never had that when you were younger. Because like I didn't have no father to lead me and to show me like, oh, this is the kind of God or this kind of man that I want you to grow up to be. Heck, the only example I had of a godly man was like the guy at my church. And I really started like learning from him and being like almost his pupil, you know. I'm like really yearning to learn more. But he was married actually; he was single. So then I started seeking out older guys. They were like elders in the church, you know, learning from them because you know they say the greatest generation. But I mean, I started learning from them and and learning from how God used them, and then God really used me and I got baptized by one of the guys that was like discipling me that was older. He was like, I mean, I say older, but it was older for me because I don't know, no offense, he was in his like 60s, but that was older for me at the time, you know what I mean? But that was older for me. So like this guy was just the epitome of like a godly man, and he really started working in me and leading in my life, and then I became baptized. He was the one that baptized me actually, and so that's really cool. You can see like pictures on my Facebook of the guy, and so his name was Seth Secular, and so I have this last verse here, Proverbs 13:20, that really spoke on my life with the men, and so it says, "Whoever walks with the wise become wise, but the companion of the fools will suffer harm." And I know this is like, well, how does that relate well to godly men? Because as a godly man, and you surround yourself with godly men, you surround yourself with the wise, and you surround yourself with those that are in the Lord and those that can strengthen you. Because in the Word it says iron sharpens iron, which means a godly man will sharpen a godly man, versus if you walk with fools, you're most likely gonna interact like that fool, Or I'm not saying you shouldn't walk with non-believers or interact with non-believers, but you need to surround yourself with people that are in love with Christ and people that are in His kingdom and growing in Him. Because the more you walk with each other, the more you grow. And so yeah, that's a very condensed version of my testimony. But my plea for you men today is just don't stop. Don't stop believing. No, it's just don't be shy about where God has you in your life. And wherever that whatever that might be. Whether that's leading your family or leading your children or your wife or if you're even single like myself. In singleness, how God can work through you just as much if you're married. Or if you have kids, and how God can work through you just like that, with the people you interact with every day at work or at, in the Army. I mean, you want to talk about a mission field, look at the Army. I mean, even as a single guys, inviting people to Graph House or inviting people here to church, and being that real true example of what a godly man or the epitome of of a wise man. So yeah, thanks for listening to me rant a bit. Y'all have a great day.